Hi, I'm Libby, and today I'm going to introduce you to the system of the gene keys and also how I use that in what I'm doing in the world. But let's start with you. I want you to begin to let yourself drift a little bit further back in your seat. And I want you to drift back into a time when you were younger and you felt I'm going to give a very specific moment and just see what image comes in your mind. Instead of telling you the feeling, I'm going to tell you a story that will evoke the feeling. If you've ever read The Giver, there's a moment when the main character, Jonah, he's throwing an apple with a friend. And the moment in the book, you're reading it, so you don't know what's happening. And the moment is described like this: the apple changed. So as a reader, you don't understand, what does the apple changed mean? Did it change shape? Did it become something new? And it's not until later in the book that you find out Jonah, or in this world, you can't see color. Everything is in black and white. And so when the line, the apple changed, is there, what it meant was that, I believe it's Jonah's character. I haven't read this in so long now. He actually sees the apple as red. So I want you to remember a moment like this. Was there a moment when something changed? It doesn't mean it stayed changed. In that moment, he didn't start seeing color all at once. He just had a flicker. Can you picture a moment you had a flicker, an inner knowing? Okay, there's that. For me, by the way, it's walking down the street. I don't know why, but when I remember these moments of knowing, of deeper mysticism or curiosity or intuition that something greater is happening, I always picture this specific moment walking down this specific street as a kid. In general, though, the entire block I grew up on, I have these moments around. Now there's another one, and please do not demonize yourself if no images come up. These are thought experiments. I'm just giving you little thought experiments to play with. Another one is a superhero. A superhero or a historical figure, but I'm assuming you are a little bit more attuned to what was on TV than what was the past was, but maybe not. A superhero or a historical figure that you looked up to, that you maybe wanted to be, or that you found exciting. And specifically, I want you to think about the feeling of separation. Did you feel connected to that superhero? Did you feel like that was an attainable thing? Or did that superhero exist in another world or another realm because of XYZ? Their gender, their ability to do things that are quote unquote not real. They're living in an alternate universe, whatever it is. How connected did you feel? Okay, so it's so interesting how we can change states, because I was literally sobbing earlier today at a meeting about the gene keys, the process and the system I'm about to explore today. But in this moment, I'm in a space of delight and a space of excitement because I have the opportunity to transmit or share a little bit of the part of me who has had these moments of understanding greater dimensionality, which is what the first image is about, and living into my dream, which is what the second one is about. I have a dream of being the more superhuman version of myself. And this is not a replacement for my humanity, because I exist in a full human body, but it's a recognition that there's an experience I get to have by being alive at this moment where I get to experience the superhero side of me. And it's also a desire of mine to run a superhero school. And I say that loosely because all of my visions involve being transformed along the way. And all of my visions involve collaboration. I don't think at all that the vision is for me to solely be running this school. However, considering this year I will have been on the earth, actually, I just had my 29th birthday, but yeah, by the end of the year, I'll have been on the earth for 30 years. And at this point, I have not met a person with this shared vision. I am learning to trust and understand that it is my role, if I want it, to actually initiate this process of this superhero training school. And that is the orientation that I'd like to have as we start to talk about the gene keys. The last thing that I want to say before we get into this is, how do you like to learn? I want you to think about something that you love learning, like love it. It doesn't feel like work. When you're doing this, it's just getting better. There might be struggle, there might be pain, but you actually like it. Could be a more physical way of learning, could be a more mental way of learning, could be a more intuitive or experiential way of learning, could be more visual, could be more auditory, could be more artistic in some way. Whatever it is, let's acknowledge a limitation here today. I'm speaking at you from across a screen from miles away. There's already a limitation that exists, but we're going to work with that limitation. But I invite you to know what you know about yourself. Like, I know I have to do for me to learn anything. But I also have learned, because I love learning and I've wanted to be able to learn during times when I don't know the right thing to do for myself, that I ingest knowledge better when I'm listening to music. So I tend to, when I'm learning something new, I play music and learn at the same time. So as I introduce this next little bit of information, because I'm going to be talking at you, I invite you to get comfortable or to shift something in your environment so that you can actually be more open and receptive to receiving. And the other thing that I'm also going to invite you to do is to stop this video and this short exploration that I will offer if it does not feel good for you. Because this information that I'm going to offer, it's not just words. And what I mean by that is Richard Rudd, who founded the system of the gene keys, but the gene keys itself is a system based on the I Ching, which comes from ancient Chinese philosophy, the Kabbalah, which comes from ancient Judaism, the astrological system from ancient India. And I believe, I'm not very into astrology, but I do believe astrology is reflected in different places. These systems are ancient. So he happens to be a man who had a vision, a download of something, but even he describes that the gene key system is a living transmission. It's something that's alive, whether or not he is the one putting some words to it. And you can think about this in terms of gravity exists regardless of who actually put the formula to it. Something that is living is already in existence. So the information I'm sharing is living information. It's not just something that you are going to learn and study out of a book. It is a living transmission, a living source of intelligence and knowledge and wisdom. That means that it already exists in you. No amount of me speaking about it, no amount of you listening to me speak about it is going to shift your understanding of it alone. The understanding is going to come from your system feeling ready to receive from this. No matter how bright the sun is shining, if you don't want the sun on your skin that day, it's not going to feel good. And it might not be the best day to be in the sun. So come back to the sun a different day. Maybe go be with something a little cooler. There's a time and a place. let this transmission, this set of information also have a time and a place. So as we move into the gene key transmission, let's look at the 3 things I asked you to think about one more time. A moment when you were beginning to grapple with the multidimensionality of life, of experience. I also sourced my experience from childhood, but many people have described to me that they haven't felt like they had a experience of God, which is actually what I'm asking you to think about. So maybe you didn't have an experience like that until older, when you were older. There's no timeline on this, but I intentionally asked it as when you realized something was different, because it could be any number of things, any number of moments where you had a sense that there's something more. The second thing I asked you to think about is your superhero, to play with, and how connected you are, to play with what is possible for you, and to play with what it would actually feel like to be living into your magnificence, because we have a culture that's very focused on the doing. But with superheroes, we don't look to them just because they, quote unquote, saved the city. We think Spider-Man's cool as soon as he's shooting webs. We think that this person is cool as soon as they're becoming invisible, as soon as they're turning into the Hulk. So this is what I'm interested in more than what you're doing. I'm interested in who you get to be and what what superpowers you have. And the third thing about learning is about presence to this moment. Because when we start talking about things like God, and when we start talking about things like power, we can get a little carried away into what could be, what has been, and what could be. And it's my hope to drop us right now into what is. And the learning is right now. So the learning for right now, as I described, is about the gene key system. The gene key system is a system for tapping into multidimensionality. It's for tapping into your inherent superpowers on an internal level. And it's a tool for helping you tap into the present moment via evolution and involution, a perspective of involution and evolution. Involution involves the inner journey that we are going on, mentally, emotionally. Evolution involves the outer processes that are happening around us. I will add something here, which is that for many years, I've studied religion, I've studied spirituality. For me, the gene key system has a very deep, homey feeling. It's my belief that we are here to learn from different systems. So just like chemistry might feel good for one person, someone else wants to study biology and someone else wants to study physics, and someone else doesn't care about science at all and just wants to be in the arts or in the social sciences. So it's okay. My expectation as a friend who's, or someone new who's receiving this video, my expectation is not that the gene keys is something that you love, but I do want to express that I have love for it, because for me, it is like a medicine for a journey that I've been on with human suffering and the particularity of this moment in history. And if you see me have love and reverence for this, that is what you're witnessing. And I just invite you to keep staying committed to what is it that you're here to learn? What is it that you're here to learn from me and from this experience? So the number one thing that I want to bring to people, and the reason I'm making this video about it to a group of you rather than these individual recordings that I initially intended to do, is that after studying the gene key system, and I'm still relatively new to it, but I've read majority of this 500-page book about it, and I've taken 3 different courses, 3 different readings through a self-help basically experience with it. One of the things that I've learned is that this transmission, this knowledge, is ultimately about waking us up to our own unique capacities, but it's also about tapping us into a collective process. And that's what excites me about it is right now, one of the most challenging things that I see for a lot of us who are trying to change our life intentionally is that there's a lot of push. There's a lot of fight. There's a lot of determinism. There's a lot of responsibility. I have to do this. And then for those of us who feel that we really have something particular to bring to the world, which happens for me since I work with people on creative work. So creative people are like pregnant people. They feel a lot of pressure. They feel a lot of heaviness. They feel a lot of sickness because literally their creative seed, I call it, is making them sick, especially if you don't know how to birth it. Then there's also a unique kind of suffering, which is a grief. It's like, I have something to bring to the world and I don't know how. And this can turn into a torment and a self-hatred. And so this psychology then often gets paired with two different things. One is spirituality, which tends to deplete the individual. I love spirituality, but a lot of spiritual frameworks will put you in a state where you're in service or you're caring for others or you're thinking about the big picture, but you're kind of reducing who you are. Or in a state where you're not in spirituality, but you're in social work, social change, you're in a state of doing and creating and quote unquote making impact or publishing books or getting this type of job or whatever. This one looks a little bit more glamorous to the world and can have more ego involved. But for those of us who've gone that path, it's exhausting, it's tiring, let alone the fact that no matter what job you work in capitalism, you feel extracted from. So many of us are left with two kinds of suffering. The first is internal because we have this own quest for our purpose. And the second is external from pursuing a path either of spirituality or of service that feels like it involves us putting and prioritizing others so much at the forefront, or even God, or even the spiritual image, that our individuality gets reduced. And this is deeply sad to me and has felt off, even though I've done both, for a variety of reasons. It's exhausting. It reduces the magic that you are. And it cuts us off to miracles because we're so focused on doing in a certain kind of way that we're not open and aware for what I will define as a miracle is spontaneous action and spontaneous connection. So the thing that I'm passionate about in the Gene Key system is that I feel I'm a producer in life, and that involves me really bringing people together to create shows, to create entertainment, to create beauty, to design things, to innovate, blah, 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 blah. And I need people tapped in order for me to produce. Like if I'm producing or directing a show and I have all these actors, if these actors subconsciously hate each other or having challenged home lives, the show can only be at one level. And so part of my challenge has been, how do I bring more of myself on board, and how do I support others to have more of themselves on board so we can have more fun and do more beautiful things in the world? So in order to do that, I need a framework. And that framework has to have, I have two challenges as a producer then. That framework that I'm supporting people in, it both has to be loose enough that it can involve the diversity of us as humans, but it also has to be refined enough that people can actually grow with it. And so for me, Gene Keys is that framework. A lot of religious frameworks, similar with the spirituality dilemma I described, they paint such a large picture that the individuality gets reduced, or you just have to submit to certain rules and laws. And a lot of the social change frameworks Again, they have to do with the doing. And this also can reduce the complexity of an individual or what we're here to do, because it can have a very fixed worldview attached to that social doing. And you can start to need people to be XYZ for you. And the thing about spontaneity and more spontaneous action is we want more space for people to be more of who they inherently are. So the gene key system, I will walk through a little bit of an overview, and then I will walk through how you can start to learn on your own. And I will be here on the other side as someone who can coach and support you, but not as someone who will be defining your profile for you, because ultimately that is your gift, that's your work, that's your joy. So the first thing I want to start with is the concept of astrology, because I've never been someone who's studied astrology, but this is a way of looking at time that we're a little bit more familiar with. So we already are familiar with the 12 months of the year, and then the astrological system puts these personality types on them, right? On these months and of these seasons. And so for most of us who are not into astrology, we would say, well, how does the timing of the sun and the moon impact who we are as people? And I'm not really going to be the one to answer that question here, because I'm a newbie on that. I just allow the mystery. The gene key system now is based on the I Ching. And the I Ching is a system that comes from Chinese philosophy. And in the I Ching, they took 8 different elements. So you can see the astrological symbols here. But with the I Ching, they took, if you look at this inner circle, the blue, yellow, white, orange, red, purple, and black here, these 8 elements, each of these colors represent an element. And the elements in the ancient I Ching was earth, mountain, water, winds, thunder, fire, heaven, and lake. And 8 times 8 is 64. So if you paired within each of these 8 elements, you paired all the other 8 elements with them, you would get 64 different groupings. And the I Ching took these 64 groupings, they paired them again to the rotations of the sun and the earth, and associated these 2 times of year. So while I'm not here to talk about the science behind that, because that's not the part that interests me, but I know that it will interest others. What is interesting to me is that when you look at these 64 pairings, so again, here's the 8 elements, and these elements came from variations of half lines and whole lines. Whole lines represent yang or masculine energy, half lines represent yin or feminine energy. And so the 8 different elements are different variations of yang and yin. And when you pair them, you get 64 different archetypes. So in the I Ching, these 64 archetypes each have a name, an expression, and it said we contain all of them. And in the gene keys, this is the exact same model the gene keys uses, except that it offers a little bit more language for a specific process in how we can consciously evolve ourselves. So rather than the astrological systems or some of the personality typing systems where it said, you are this, fixed. What the I Ching or the gene keys looks at is there is these 64 archetypes. We all contain them all. The earth contains them all. In a single year, at every single moment, we're at a time where one of them is even being reflected. Right now, the one being reflected is timelessness. But here's where your invitation lies. You actually have a conscious ability to participate in your own growth here. And so this to me is where multidimensionality comes in, and being a superhero comes in, and being on a path of learning comes in. Because now you're not just taking what is, you're not just being told this is who you are, but you are opening up to this potential that you exist within a larger landscape. And you are inviting what would happen if I was to consciously open up to this. And this brings about the next thing, which is a human design and gene keys chart. Excuse me. So right now, human design has been growing. Human design came out in 1987. Someone named Ra, who also had a vision for this. And the human design system, similar to the ancient Indian system of chakras, looks at these spaces within the body where we have opening, where they call it defined or undefined. If one of these centers is open or closed, defined or undefined, this looks at how much spaciousness we have there. And it also looks at these 64 archetypes that I just described that are also associated with the astrological system. I've been less of a student of human design as I had gene keys, but a key thing within the human design system is that it is an experiment, that it is a set of knowledge about you, again, based on your time of birth, but that it's here to help us experiment with how we make choices and ultimately open us up to the fact that there is an ease within the structures of our world, that when we are tapped into how our body makes choices based off of what's open, what's closed, what's defined, what's not defined, this process of living into who we are actually will become much more easeful, much more supported. Richard Rudd, the founder of the Gene Keys, he studied human design. He was a teacher of human design, but he began to have his own openings, and he himself wanted to uncover more about these 64 archetypes, because the human design system is focused more on the body and more on what's called your incarnation cross, which is the specific time that you were born or place you were born and its intersection. The Gene Keys looks at 10 other or 7 other of these archetypes that impact you. So you can see that all this can get kind of wordy and confusing. And yet, the invitation, just like human design, is an experiment. And in human design, if you've ever gotten a human design reading, the invitation is, here's a way of connecting with your own body that will create more ease in your life, in the way you make decisions. With the gene key system, there's 3 paths that a gene key profile will awaken you to. 3 different paths that will help foster that ease, but also foster your capacity for service and prosperity. And this is really what interests me. So unlike the human design system, which is more about how do you make choices? In human design, they talk about your authority and your strategy. How do you make choices? How do you listen to yourself? How do you tap into that ease on a day-to-day? the Gene Keys is looking at your life, and it's not looking at here's how to solve yourself, here's how to fix yourself. It's actually inviting you into this type of puzzle for continuously opening. And when you read about the Gene Key vision, which is kind of embedded throughout the book that specifically talks about all 64 archetypes, what you see is this vision for involution and evolution on a collective level as well. So this is a huge attraction for me as well as someone who is looking again to produce and get us more connected as people, because it's not just about this is how Libby is in her little world. It's that, this is happening for all of us. So I'm going to give two examples of things that are happening for all of us in the Gene Key transmission, and then I'll go into how you can read a personal profile. Like I said, there are 64 archetypes. So the two that are seen as very important to the time we're living in right now are Gene Key 22 and Gene Key 55. Gene Key 22 is about grace. And with all of the Gene Keys, what we look at is both the shadow, the place of pain or suffering, the gift, which is like the lotus coming up out of the mud. The gift does not exist without the shadow. And the siddhi, which is a Sanskrit word for the kind of spiritual essence. So the shadow of 22 is dishonor. The gift is honor. And the siddhi or the spiritual gift is grace. And one thing that the Gene Key 22 offers us to think about as humans is how to begin to face this dishonor, how to go. The path of the Gene Keys is not about fighting. It's about allowing, accepting, and embracing the shadow as something that's happening within us, as something that's genetically coming through from our past. And from that place, finding the gift within it. So this is also something that's very interesting to me, because when we ask, how do we actually open to that next dimension of life? And when we ask, how do we actually get to that next level of superhero within us? What are we even saving or working on? And then how do we learn? The Gene Key process of accept, allow, and embrace opens us up to starting to be with suffering in a way that's both very intimate and personal, but also very collective. It says that these things that we're suffering from, they're not just individuals. So collectively, we are suffering from dishonor. Collectively, honor is the gift that we get to start to live. And then collectively, grace will be this gift that is coming, this deeper gift that's coming forth from all of us. Another example of one of the 64 archetypes that all of us collectively are facing right now is the 55th, which is about victimization. The gift is freedom, and the spiritual gift is freedom. Usually the siddhi, the spiritual gift, is something else entirely. But in this case, they're both freedom, because it names that there's different dimensions of freedom. There's a more physical freedom, and there's a deeper spiritual freedom. And Gene Key 55 is also one thing that the Gene Key always says is that every single Gene Key is embedded in all the others. This used to be said to me when I worked with a coach who was very values driven. He would say, if you pursue one virtue, you pursue all the virtues. This can be found in philosophy as well. In the Gene Keys, it's a similar. So this is what I love about the journey. It's this concept of many pathways, same place. You could study one Gene Key, you'll end up studying all the Gene Keys. But the 55th is where many of us are stuck as humans. The Gene Key, what I like that it talks about with victimization is it's not looking at you feeling upset, because the shadows in the Gene Key world are about upset. They're about difficulty. They're about struggle. So a lot of times when people say, I don't want to be a victim, as soon as they're in a bad mood or as soon as they're upset, they start repeating that. Oh, I don't want to be a victim, so I should get in a positive mindset or find a way or be strong or be a warrior. And because the Gene Keys is so much about actually entering deeper into the suffering, in this case, what they say victimization is about not being able to own our emotions. It's being a victim of our emotions. So rather than trying to demonize where we're at, demonize the pain, demonize feeling low, demonize feeling heavy, demonize feeling sad, we actually start to put our attention on the escape, the attempt to escape the emotions, and to actually embrace the emotional experience and say the emotional experience is not all of me. I'm deeper than that as well. And so to actually face the victim state, I actually have to face my avoidance of emotion itself. And when I can actually take responsibility for emotion and how I truly feel and feel what that is and actually feel that that's mine to feel, then freedom can be and new freedom can come. And one more thing about the Gene Keys is that what Richard Rudd, who's the founder, offers is that we should, when we're in these spaces of pain where the shadow states are present, we're invited to focus 20% on the shadow and try to shift 80% into the gift. And the spiritual essence, the city you can also remember, but it's more about putting your attention on the gift, which is the part you can control. And the spiritual essence is almost like the sun that's going to end up rising. So these are, I want to pause here before I get into reading your own profile, because these two keys are really guides right now in the whole system. And again, this is different than the human design world where, okay, learn about you and how you're different from everyone. In the Gene Keys, you're really being invited to see how much we are all on a shared journey right now. So I'll just pause here while you maybe move in your body and see how that feels, to really think about how could your life be different if you think about where you are dishonoring yourself or dishonoring people you love. What would shift if honor was present? What would shift if you had grace for yourself and others? And if you think about where victimization is present and an escape and a running from emotions, what would shift if freedom was possible? Freedom not to escape it, but freedom to be able to be with the emotion and find your own freedom from being trapped by that emotion. And the other thing I want you to take or question from this space is, and you can write it out, you can move it in your body as I'm doing, is to actually consider what would it look like when you are in this space of dishonor, when you're in this space of victimhood. What would it look like if you, in these moments, when these shadows are present, you were not at war with them. You are actually feeling what they were, because what they are is past states that are running through us. Some really might be happening, but you can probably bring to mind people who are not intentionally dishonoring you. There is, of course, oppression on the earth right now and dishonoring. But we can also see, if we look at our lives, we can see the way that there's well-meaning people and loving people around us, where we're still feeling that dishonor and we're still feeling a victim of our emotions. So this has a little bit more to do with our ancestral trauma and our ancestral things that are coming through us. And this is another thing I love about the Gene Keys is I've been working on trauma healing throughout the year, and there'd be a certain point where I could see these issues are larger than us as individuals. They're larger than our cultures. They're larger than our families. How do we start to get in touch with these larger things that are pulsing through? So the Gene Keys gives us some language for these shadow states that are running through our DNA, and a vision that our DNA is actually going, well, the theory with Gene Keys is that our DNA will continue to evolve, but it's going to evolve with our conscious awareness. And the Gene Keys mentions similar with, this is mirrored in science and this is mirrored in astrology, that it takes 7 years for our cells to regenerate. So I want you to think about age 0 to 7, 8 to 14, 15 to 21, 22 to 28, 29 to 35, 36 to 42, 43 to 49. Is it 50 to 57? Okay, I can't go beyond there right now with my sevens. Not it's 56, but that feels off. Either way, picture these 7-year periods and just notice for a minute how you've already experienced shifts in your life through different 7-year periods. This is what we're looking at when we're looking at gene keys. We're not looking at how do I get better and get a quick fix. We're really looking at what is this evolution and this change that's going to happen over the course of my life that I get to participate in, that I get to be here for. So to me, as someone working on collective change, this is the beauty of the gene keys. This is actually what I love. But on a much more even close to your heart level, there is something simpler. And it's challenging, but it's simpler as well. Without having to learn all 64 archetypes and how to do it, or there's no how, but how to understand all 64 or how the world's going to change or anything like that. The Gene Keys offer something called the Golden Path. And it's 11 different gene keys that show up in your life, in your world. And these set of 11 keys is what I'm most interested in coaching people through. And it's recommended that someone actually take 11 months to work through this. And even for me, who wants to become an ambassador, a teacher of the gene keys, they say to spend 2 years on this. And I've just spent 2 months on it just to give a little bit of insight right now. And before I give the insight and really acknowledge how elementary I am at this level, but I'm very dedicated, so I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 months. And fun fact, I feel I've been led to study this last 2 months because there's been multiple occasions where I was, I had other plans and the Wi-Fi actually went out. And the Wi-Fi had no reason to go out in any of these places. So I always had on the table, like I was going to work on XYZ thing in my business or XYZ thing over here. And I was reading through the Gene Key books and then the internet would go out. And so I began to, and I don't have money right now, so I couldn't just go to another place to get internet. I just had to say, okay, this is where I am. The one place I didn't have a car, and another place I didn't have money to go somewhere else. And it was like, okay, I'm studying. Here we are. So okay, I lost where I was. My intention is to support people. I'm going to navigate, whether it's going to be supporting people over 11 months or at a baseline. My intention and my hope is to support people at least for 11 weeks. In my other coaching work, we do it 10 weeks anyway, or 12 weeks, because this is a season. 12 weeks is a full season. So my hope with supporting someone through their Gene Key profile is I can support you for a season. But the reality is you might need way, 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 way more time than that, and that's okay. So the 3 paths that the Gene Keys looks at are a path of your gifts, a path of your heart opening, and a path of your prosperity or your service to others. And the thing that I love the most about the Gene Keys, about these 3 paths, is that the reason why it's very enlivening for me is a year ago, I began to call the year that I'm in the golden year. And this path is called the Golden Path. Another fun fact is at the beginning of this year, I used the word delight and ecstasy. And then a person who I met this year who's been very significant in my life, at the heart of their profile is delight and ecstasy. So this is just a fun thing with manifestation, just even noticing. There's several people I've been coaching during the year, and they would always say, there's one person, they would always say, wisdom, wisdom, wisdom was something they wanted. And then at the heart of one of their gifts in their path was wisdom. There's another woman, she would always say, what I struggle with most is perfectionism, perfectionism, perfectionism. And at the heart of her path was perfectionism. So Richard Rudd, when he created the language of the gene keys, like I said, these archetypes have already existed through the I Ching. The I Ching uses slightly different language. So when I share the numbers on the gene keys, look up the I Ching language as well as the gene key language, but just notice how this language pops out for you in your own life. I'm going to be showing my own profile, so it's not going to have that same ring to it as yours might. But I invite you to really start to play. This whole experience is one of wonder and curiosity and openness. So the other thing about the 3 paths that I think is very beautiful within the gene key system is one of the most challenging. Oh yeah, I set out this golden year for myself. And within my golden year, there was this exploration of how do I support people in all the different ways I've wanted to. And the ways that I've thus far been working on in my life are health, relationships, and creativity. These 3 themes are so apparent that I created 3 separate companies. And I made a choice last year that I was going to separate out these 3 companies because from a standpoint of how I view life, I know these 3 things aren't fully integrated, but from the standpoint of business development and the nuances of working on each of these things, I thought I actually need to separate them so that I can have a more clear client base. And these are essentially the 3 paths of the gene keys. The health is about our genius, though. It is about the gifts that we have. The heart opening, the relationship work, and prosperity or creativity is us actualizing. And unlike the way our world operates, where a lot of profiles or readings, we're always looking at who should I be and what should I do, the gene keys actually asks us to kind of put a mirror and say, who already am I? How do I just become more of who I am? It's already here. It's already here. It's already here. This goes back to this concept of ease. So this is how you can read a profile. You can go to the website called genekeys.com, and there's a place called a free profile. You can try the new community beta test, and you'll be able to enter your birth details, and it will give you a chart that looks like this. And this is a pretty confusing looking chart, so that's why we're here today. And actually, I'm going to do this in a separate video. So for now, I invite you just to take a deep breath and just notice how you're feeling and what is exciting you, what's opening for you, what questions are coming, what knowing is coming, what joy is here, what resistance is here. Part of me being an embodiment coach is that it's very, very important to me how we feel in the process of it's welcome. It's okay. We can do it. You're not alone. If the gene keys is something that's interesting to you, I invite you to look at the next video. And either way, I invite you to journal, walk, or write, or sing, or dance about the fact that, or the possibility that everything you need is in you. And we are all connected, but you actually have the answer to the longings that you've been searching for because you have a unique gift to offer this world.